Welcome into Phil's Tax Hacks and Other Retirement Facts with CPA and personal financial specialist, Phil Putney. Now let's get rolling with today's show. Welcome into Phil's Tax Hacks. This week on the podcast, we're going to talk about easy ways to ruin your retirement. So let's jump in and talk about some of these. The destination factor. Sometimes, Phil, you like to take trips and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. Where you're going is the destination for the activity, whatever it is you're doing. But treating retirement as such maybe isn't the best way to do that, because it's not really like you get to the campground, you're there. You're there, but yeah, this is, a retirement vacation is going to last 20, 30 years. So,
right.
But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things you go back a couple of years back, a few years back now, and kind of been drilled into us, what's your number? It's been looked at kind of like that destination. How much do I need?
Yeah.
And that's one piece of the equation, but now how is that going to last throughout retirement? So you've got to look beyond what do I need, because that's the accumulation part of it. That's obviously important. You got to get there first.
Yeah.
But now that you're there, what does that really look like? And there's all of these different factors that play into that retirement road trip, so to speak.
And are you retiring to something, right? I think that's where the disconnect is, because you don't want, it used to be the case. Some people would say, I don't want to retire because that's the end of my life kind of thing. I'm just going to sit on the porch and wait away. So retire to something and don't treat it as the end of the road, but just a new stage to a new phase.
Yeah. And a lot of times that's a challenge as people enter retirement. It is, what does that really look like? What do I've dedicated all these years to work, and that's been the big portion of your daytime experience. And now that's free. What do you do with it? And you've got to be careful. And that's one of the downfalls in retirement is people don't have that plan of what they're going to do with their time. Now, a lot of people, especially early retirement, you realize, I don't know how I had time to work, because they've got all these things that have built up projects or hobbies or whatever that you wanted to get to, and you finally have time to. But that doesn't last very long, usually. I guess depends on your honey-do list.
You end up shopping for sleep number beds as well.
That's right.
Okay, so that's one area, right? So just don't treat retirement as a destination. Rather, treat it more like the beginning of a new phase. I think that will help people along the way quite a bit. Believing that retirement will solve all of the ills, that's another place that we can easily kind of step into this. If you think about it from, other milestones in your life, Phil, right? So we get married. So sometimes we say, oh, well, once I find a spouse, and then we go, well, once we have kids, or once the kids can, walk, like you keep moving this thing. Once they can drive their own car, we'll be able to X.
Right.
And then you go, well, retirement's got to be that though, right? Once I get to retirement, everything.
It's it. Right.
Yeah.
It's, the old adage, I just need to earn a little bit more. No, you're going to spend it anyway. It's, it's not you got to figure out, how does this really look? Is I going to solve a problem that's already there? Now, granted, if it's, part of that problem is a lot of stress and, whatever that is relating to work, sure, it might solve that, but it creates or brings with it another, I wouldn't call it a problem, but a challenge, because now you got to make sure that income is being replaced somehow, or spending is being adjusted to make it all work.
Well, and to your point, challenges can come in many forms. So retirement is definitely a good thing, but you're sometimes trading certain stresses. And again, this depends on the kind of person you are, right?
Right.
If you are a bit of a worrier or a bit of a stressor, you're going to find a reason to swap that out. Well, no longer do you have the work stress, as you just mentioned. Maybe you got the honey-do stress.
Right.
Whatever, right.
Or now you get the stress of, am I going to run out of money? Or what's the election going to do to the market? Am I going to have enough?
Right. Yeah.
And all these other, so yeah. So don't think it's going to solve all the problems. It can help.
Yeah.
It's like people retire, you get to that point. That's why some people don't, because they don't want to give up, that piece of their life, even though they've got enough maybe to retire.
Right.
But yeah, so don't go into it thinking it's going to fix everything.
If you're looking,
probably isn't.
Right. If you're looking for an excuse for whatever it is, you're going to find it. It's not hard to find an excuse when you're on the prowl for one. So, so definitely do that. Okay. So that's a second easy way we can do that or ruin our retirement. Number 3, assuming that our monthly spending habits in retirement can be kind of determined by the spending habits when we were working. Now, notice I didn't say the whole 80% thing, right? You're going to need less. That's kind of like saying, okay, we're spending, I don't know, $4,000 a month, right?
Mhm.
while when we're working, that should easily drop, to $3,000 a month once we stop going to work. Well, COVID may have showed you differently. Maybe
Yes,
not.
absolutely. Because you've been, kind of retired almost, maybe,
Sorta. Yeah.
still working at home, maybe, maybe not. But yeah, you get a little bit better idea of, okay, now I've got time. And unfortunately, with that comes time to look at different things. And maybe you find out that I don't really like the living room the way it is. I'm going to do some remodeling or whatever it happens to be. So there's a lot of that going on with,
Yeah.
people staying at home. But yeah, spending is probably the biggest piece of retirement that unfortunately I don't see a lot of people spending time figuring out. I mean, at a minimum, what we recommend is, what are you spending today?
Right.
And then let's start there. And then typically it's add to it, because now you have time to do those hobbies. And, maybe you're golfing now, but you only get to do it once a week in a golf league or something. But hey, you're retired, so you can join 5 golf leagues if you want. Or, what does that look like to you? You want to travel. You've got a lot of time to travel, although now travel is not really
Well,
an option, or
yeah.
at least a good option necessarily.
And I
But
was going to say, don't let COVID give you a false read, because
yes,
if you're sitting there saying, "Hey, we are spending considerably less money," so I was right. We're going to spend less in retirement.
yep,
This isn't what happened is probably not what retirement would have looked like, because you want to get out and do things and go
mhm.
for at least for a few years, and that's going to get there. We're going to get there again, and you're going to be like, "Hey, I need to spend money on X trip and Y trip," and oh shoot, I'm spending more money than I thought.
Yeah. So like we kind of hinted at, and or beyond hinted at, actually talked a lot about, is having that plan. What does retirement look like to you? Is it from an activity standpoint? What is it? What are you going to do? From a spending standpoint, what does my retirement look like? Which is a lot of times driven from that activity standpoint. What do you see retirement being? From a hobbies, a travel, whatever it happens to be. But always at a minimum, I would say start with, what are you spending today? Because that net paycheck, when it comes in, it goes one of two places. You either spend it or you save it.
Yeah.
And if it's not being saved, you're spending it, whether you realize it or not. Because we go through our workshops. We have our attendees fill out this budget worksheet just as kind of a start to figure out, okay, what do I think I'm spending? 9 times out of 10, if they filled that out, it's significantly less than the reality of what's coming in today. And when we go through that exercise, it's an eye opener for a lot of people who are like, well, what do you mean? Where's the $2,000 a month? I'm like, I don't know. I'm telling you, this is what you have coming in, and this is what you've documented you think you're spending.
Yep.
You're not saving it right. I mean, it's, you don't have a box under the bed that it's going in or something. And
It's the little things that I think when we do that, we tend to kind of gloss over. We think of the big things. We don't often think of the little things.
Yeah, you write down the utilities, the
Yeah.
big items, but it's,
And even like the simple things nowadays is, I have 4 streaming services. I've got Disney
yes,
Plus when the kids come over, and I've got or grandkids. I got Netflix, and you might think of one of them, right? You say, "Oh, I'm spending $50 on TV," when it's maybe more like 75 or 90. So
yeah. And when you sit down and think, oh, I'm not going to pay that $100 and some for cable, but by the time you get the internet and all this streaming services, you're almost there anyways.
That's true. That's a good point. You mentioned activity. Well, that's actually another easy way to screw up your retirement, to ruin your retirement, is to stop being active. Kind of back to my first point. Don't treat it as the end game and just sit on the porch and wait for death to come, right?
Right.
And we've done a good job of that societally prior to COVID and even during COVID. Of older folks are definitely more active, eating better, exercising more, all that kind of stuff. So it's moving in the right direction.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons that, looking back, historically, maybe at our parents or grandparents and what retirement looked like to them, and they didn't necessarily have as long of a retirement. And granted, different lifestyle back then and medical and everything else, but part of it is they had probably a much less active retirement. Let's sit out on the front porch and, watch what's going on today in the neighborhood, type of thing, which is great if that's what you want to do.
Yeah.
But there's downsides to not having that activity. So
yeah. If you want to make cob pipes or whatever it was on the
That's
front
right.
porch,
Yep. Whatever
hey,
your
nothing wrong
hobby
with
is,
that.
you wanted to pick up. Yep.
Go for it. But we've definitely gotten a lot better because there's so many more interesting things to do, obviously, than
Yes.
our grandparents in prior generations. Okay, so final one, and then we'll wrap up this podcast this week on simple ways that we can ruin our retirement, and that is just your investing habits. They need to alter. We've talked about this before, but they need to alter like your age does. You're not
Yes.
35, so don't invest like you're 35. I mean, I'm 49. I'm not investing like I did when I was 29.
Yeah, and we've talked a lot about, having that spending plan. Where's the money going to come from? And then your investment plan should match that, because you have to now spend the money versus accumulate it. And that's the biggest challenge from an investment standpoint that I see, is that as you enter retirement, you want to invest the same way you used to. Well, I've been in this fund, or, invested this way, and I've done really good. Oh, the last time the market, went through a correction in 2008, I was fine. I didn't sell anything, and that's great, but you weren't spending it. You had, 10, 15 years plus to retirement.
Right.
It's a different scenario now. You get into what we call sequence of returns risk, which simply means when you're spending that money and volatility is happening, markets going up and down, as the market goes down, you're still spending the same amount of money. You're spending more and more, selling more shares to get the same dollars. So something you have to plan for. You've got to make sure you've got a structure in such a way that you can hedge against the downside of risk. And that's where we use that bucket type strategy. So.
Well, we talk about the horizon, right? You're riding
Yep.
off into the sunset. If you whatever kind of picture you want to paint when you're thinking about retirement, well, time horizon is basically what we're talking about here. So if your time horizon is just a few years down the road, you shouldn't be investing in such risky maneuvers typically, unless that's something that you've worked out with your advisor because you have to. Everybody's situation is different, so I'm not saying I guess it's not across the board.
Yeah, it's not exactly.
But
and it's not necessarily with all the money too. And that's the other
right.
piece of the investment scenario that I see that often gets blended in from what accumulation looks like in decumulation or spending in retirement. Is you're used to looking at the whole bucket of money, so to speak, as one, the 401k, whatever it is, versus as you get to retirement, you still need that growth component, because the opposite of this is true. You're not 90. You're not going to need all of it in the next 5 years.
Right.
So you can't invest too conservatively either, because hopefully you will be in retirement 20, 30 years.
Yep.
So
Definitely.
you got to plan on both sides of that.
You got to hit the old plan button there. So
That's right.
If you need a little bit of help with that, folks, you should know what to do by now. But if not, we'll tell you again, because that's what we do. A couple of things. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast. We'd certainly appreciate that. You can find it at philstaxhacks.com. You can find it again at philstaxhacks.com. If you have some questions, need some immediate help before you take any action, you should always check with a qualified professional like Phil. You can call him at 248-888-7530. If you're watching this on YouTube, you should be checking out the video version. I'll have it on the screen there for you. But 248-888-7530. And hit a subscribe button on YouTube as well if you'd like, or go to Phil's Facebook page. Whatever the case is, lots of ways to get in contact with him and keep up with all the good content we try to provide for you folks. So reach out to us here at philstaxhacks.com. That's philstaxhacks.com. And with that, that's going to be it for this week on the show. But thank you, my friend. I appreciate you as always.
Thanks. Good to see you again.
We'll catch you the next time here on Phil's Tax Hacks and Other Retirement Facts with Phil Putney. Thanks for your time on the podcast.
Investment advisory services offered through AFS Wealth Management. The content of this program is provided for informational purposes only and is not a solicitation or recommendation of any investment strategy. Investments and/or investment strategies involve risk, including the possible loss of principal. There is no assurance that any investment strategy will achieve its objectives.